Hey, what's up? It's another episode of Watch You Strappin. They're not watch reviews, they're just wristwatch check with a strap pairing just to show it off. And today I am back on the, this is a Longines Weems Pilot Watch. It's a World War II kind of a pilot watch reissue. The reference is This particular reference is L2.606.4, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I always thought these were pretty cool watches. These are like the early pilot watches that the British RAF and some U.S. Army Air Force pilots used to have. These were non-hacking, manual wind, and the way they got around this was with what looks like a timing bezel on the outside, but you have this locking crown here, and basically you can rotate that, and basically you reset the 0 seconds position to wherever it's supposed to be. Say if it was like, say if you got, they were setting the watches and synchronizing it, and say the tone for when the top of the hour or the minute would be right beep, like there, right 11, for example. Then you'd rotate the bezel to the 60s right over the 11, and that would be the start of the minute, right? And that's the way that you got around non-hacking watches back then, to make sure everyone was synchronized. So you don't have to depend on trying to, because you can't hack the seconds. So it's gonna, once you start winding it, it's just gonna start up whenever and wherever it's going to, right? And you don't want to waste time trying to find a way to synchronize that basically independent moving seconds hand. It's just going to start running when it does. So when that happens, all you do to get around that is simply find the new 0 point for the seconds, and it's a pretty simple and effective way to do that. I don't think anybody else has a watch that quite does that, other than the style of watches. You could, of course, use the bezel for timing purposes, but then you kind of lose your synchronization point, unless before you set it, you know where it is, and so that say you use the bezel to time, then you wanted to just, you're not timing anymore. You want to just make sure that when the top of the minute is, the start of the seconds, then you just move it back to wherever you noted that it was. Pretty simple, actually, way to get around that. So today I've been on this Barton strap. It's leather. I've been trying to find out the color of this because I forgot what it was. But yeah, I think I wanted something 16 millimeters. Yes, these are 16 millimeter straps, and this lug spacing here. This is a small watch, and this is what the original size was, about 33 millimeters. Actually, in fact, they were even smaller before. If I remember correctly, they said they were maybe even as small as 28 or 27 millimeters at one point, really early on. So this is actually the larger size, and it's pretty typical for, I guess, the 30s or 40s era of watches. But I take it into the context of where this watch was made and originally produced and stuff, and it's fine. And on my wrist, which is about 7 inches, I think it works fine. It takes a little moment just to get used to the, I guess you would call it, proportion shock. Especially if you're like me, you're used to wearing watches that are around 39 to maybe 41, maybe even 43 millimeters. That's 10 millimeters larger than this watch, which is what I was wearing earlier today. It just takes a moment to just get used to it, and you don't think about it in those terms of like, trying to compare it to other watches. You just take it on its own merits and style and design. It works, and this is a lovely piece. Nice cream sector dial, basically, right? Clean Arabic numerals. It's got like a bit of a cream portion, rings around a ring around where the hour markings are, and then the rest of it is like a brushed silver that's going in the center, as well as on the outer, I guess, index or chapter ring if you want to call it that, where they have that little red marking at the top. It's a little accent of color. And yeah, it's pretty cool. Going over the measurements, I just went over it just now. It's actually 33.3 or 33.4 millimeters at the bezel, which is basically the same as the case size. As you can see, it's pretty much lined up with the case. So that's exactly the same size of the case. Lug to lug is actually just under 41 millimeters, if I'm not mistaken. Pretty short, but I think it's fine, to be honest. The lugs do downturn, so, for my wrist at least, it seems to fit and cover up pretty well. You're not going to get much wrist gap. And the thickness of this thing is under 10 millimeters. Just a hair. It's like 9.9 is what I measured. And that's including that ever so slight crystal that's slightly domed there. That's a sapphire. I imagine the original were probably either mineral or acrylic back in the days, but this is a reissue. A Japanese limited edition. So that was only in Japan, limited to 1,000 pieces. Didn't even know this was around until someone told me about there's an automatic version which has loom, a little bit different way it's designed. I mean, basically like this, but then the crown's at the two. It's a bit larger. I would say for more people, they will find it more wearable. I'm pretty sure it's about 36 millimeters. But they kind of messed it up by putting a date at the 3, because these watches don't have dates. I don't know why they did that. They should have just left the date off of this, and that one would have been pretty nice, actually. That was the first one that I knew about. Someone told me, because I kind of mentioned that I wish that somehow the conversation got into me just mentioning that I wish that Longines would be, I can see them being the ones to reproduce like a Weems style pilot watch out of the 5 main ones that did it, which include Omega, which I think they had the largest production numbers. Reference CK2129, if I got that correctly. It's kind of like the one you see in Dunkirk. That's a lot of people reference. That's the easiest way to find it in the big movies, and of course a Christopher Nolan movie. And who else? You got Zenith, JLC, and Movado, including Longines. Those are the main 5 that were producing these Weems style pilot watches. And then later on, they lost the timing bezel or the second setting bezel. This is what that bezel is actually called, because you set the seconds to it to zero, find the 0 point. Since the later models were eventually got hacking ability, then they didn't need this bezel anymore, and so it became cleaner. And you see, Longines has an example of that, and you can see Omega has some too, and of course other brands. They're nice, but I like this original version, the first early version. I find those other ones a bit too plain for my taste. And I like the fact that you still have this really cool timing bezel. It's very functional, and I like the second crown. It just gives it more detailed and I think a bit more character than the other ones, personally speaking. And you can't go wrong with nice heat blued hands up against like a silver or cream colored dial. That just works pretty nicely. There we go. And regarding this band, the strap, I just wanted something, because it's 16 millimeters, and I mentioned this in a couple other videos too. I had to be sure to keep it from looking way too dainty and a bit feminine. You don't want to taper at all in something like this. You want it to be a straight 16 from the lug all the way through, which this one is. You can see there's no taper, and you don't need it 16 millimeters, and this helps keep it, a bit more manly looking, I suppose. You can call it that. But I think it works, It's just, you just get used to it. It's a nice vintage piece, and I guess it's considered neo-vintage because this is right around 1990, 95, I believe these were made, roughly around that time period. So I would consider that neo-vintage, but this is a really pretty faithful reproduction of the ones that Longines used to produce. And so much so that actually on the case back, they even wrote engraved on the back said that it's a replica, and they do this on all 1,000 models of these, because I guess they feel like it looks so similar and so faithful to the original models that it could actually be mistaken for the genuine World War II version, which is I guess by now this is 2024, 80 or just actually it's June 6, 2024, so it's the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And so yeah, it's at least 80 years old, because these were actually probably in service before then, in the early part of the war, in the mid-30s, I guess, 35, 36, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around there. I hope I got my World War II timing and period correct. I'm pretty sure that's when the war kind of started, and then the Americans got into it before 1944, but they didn't actually get into the land-based invasion until then. They didn't actually touch foot really into Europe until that D-Day, and that's when things turned the tide of war in the Allies' favor, and for the rest of the world, for that matter. But anyways, this is far from being a history lesson here, but I just thought it appropriate to try to wear something like this in some commemorative way for D-Day. There were pilots involved in the prep work that led to the invasion. There's definitely bombing runs and stuff that they had to do to kind of help clear the way, and limit the resources for the Germans, which sadly the recent TV series Masters of the Air about the B-17, specific B-17 squadron, but that whole B-17 bomber, what they were involved in. They sadly just kind of skipped over the part where they had to do what they did during around D-Day, which is kind of sucks. I still love Band of Brothers the most out of all these type of World War II series. That's definitely one of the best ones, if not the best of the series. I liked it over the Pacific, and I think it goes hand in hand, just about as good as Saving Private Ryan. But Masters of the Air was cool from that perspective of the winged airmen, the bombers from that era. It's just that they really sadly just kind of skimmed over it really quickly. You get the gist of little aspects of all the different aspects of the the pilots, the how it was to be in the flying over the missions and to being shot down and captured, and all the way to the end of the war. So they had to really rush it. And besides, going back to this watch, this is actually probably a little bit past that period. Again, before 1944. It probably started to get phased out by that time, I would imagine. They started to have the other watches, but nonetheless, it's still from that general World War II period. But again, this is a new vintage version, which I don't mind. It's just a pretty darn close reissue of the original, but it's only about 30 years old versus 80. So, I think I feel more confident about the lifespan of this watch over something vintage. I'm sure if you took care of it and it was service, a true vintage one should be fine too, but there you have it. What else can I say? Oh, the strap, going back, it was a little bit too new looking. Like the brown was very even, and it just I couldn't click with it. It just wasn't working. So what I basically did was try to accelerate some aging onto this. As you can see, hopefully, there is some distress on the leather. And basically, I just kept rubbing this with a cloth and some alcohol. 70% is what I have at home to clean stuff, and I just rubbed it to try to get some of the color faded down. And I just kept rubbing it with my nails and fingers, and rolling the leather and all sorts of things, just to get it to be more naturally broken in, even though I did it in a natural way, but I think it kind of works. And I, just, I didn't have pictures of it before because I really did not like the look of it, and it was just not worth it for me to take pictures of it with the brand new looking strap. It looked just too new, wasn't nearly distressed enough. And now that I did that, I think it looks a hell of a lot better. It just looks more, correct, trying to pair it with such a watch. And I guess that's all I gotta say. Again, it's getting kind of long, but yeah, I actually wanted to do this video way back in about a week ago or so, right? When it was Memorial Day weekend. It's just, that's kind of a war military sort of observance, holiday observance, observe a holiday. Did I say that correctly? Yeah. And I did wear it, but I just was so busy. I didn't have a chance to take any photos or videos of it. And then the time passed, and then I said, all right, well, I got to move on to other things. And then recently, I guess it's just the 80th anniversary of D-Day right today, June 6, 2024. So I was like, all right, well, let me try to bust this back out and just get a couple of snapshots and videos of it while I can, because it's kind of related in a little bit. So that's it. Thanks for watching. And yeah, this is not my normal environment. I don't like the lighting in here, but it's the best I've got to work with. But trying to get out of that harsh sunlight and just show you this watch. It's quite lovely, and it's actually running quite surprisingly well. Initially, when I first got it, a little bit on the fast side, but considering its age, not too bad. I think it was basically plus 6 or 7 seconds a day or so, which is not bad at all. But I think recently, the last few times I've put it on and worn it and just been keeping track of the time, it seems to be, gosh, almost +1 or +2 now, something around there, much tighter, and that's great. As far as I know, this watch has never been serviced. I don't know the history of it. I just bought it from a seller in Japan off eBay, and I don't know, one of these days I should just bring it in and just make sure it's all taken care of inside, and gaskets and whatnot, and keep it running longer. But yeah, I think this is a really nice, charming piece. Small in stature, but big in character and personality and history, because these type of watches back in the day for pilots and bombardiers and the navigators and stuff were very important for them. Keeps things synchronized perfectly and with everyone else, so that they making sure that they're at certain waypoints or along their navigation, and calculating their bombing runs and whatnot, and all sorts of things. So it's very critical, and even being off by a couple seconds can make a huge difference. So yeah, the importance of watches during the war is not to be underestimated. So anyways, thanks for watching, and enjoy your watches.